the first things we learned early on in our parenting, we took some parenting courses and read books like all parents try to do, I think. But one of the things that somebody explained to us early on that we thought was ahead of time, we thought this seems like it's going to be a big deal. And later we realized it was even a bigger deal than we thought it was. And that was the 4 stages of parenting. 4 stages of parenting. The discipline years being 0 to 5. Training years 5 to 12, coaching years 12 to 18, and then the friendship years 18 on. So I want to tell you a little bit about each of these. The discipline years are the years where we are really beginning to teach our kids that there are consequences for their actions, and we just need them to obey. If they don't obey, they might get hit by a car, they might burn themselves. I mean, you can't reason with them yet. So we really are teaching them that there are consequences related to their behaviors. And these are the years that, you're disciplining in whatever form you choose to discipline your children in. But in our home, we had 3 things that were offenses that we knew we needed to just hop on really quick, and that was disobedience, dishonesty, and disrespect. We called them the 3 Ds. We actually used those words with our kids, even when they were too young to understand exactly what they meant. We would say, Andrew, you were disobedient or you were disrespectful. And over time, they began to understand what those 3 things were. And so these were the years that we just were trying to hammer into our kids that there are consequences for your behaviors. And when they're young, that's the best time for them to learn that there are consequences for their behaviors, because as they get older, the stakes rise with each, the older they get. So we want them to learn while the stakes are low, there are consequences for your behaviors. And so that's the discipline years. The training years are a little bit different. Those are the years where we're really beginning to put a why behind the what. They're beginning to be able to reason a little bit, so we start reasoning with them, explaining to them the why behind the what, and we're explaining while we're training. There's some overlap, I think, between all of these. There are still some discipline is happening in the training years. It doesn't mean you're not disciplining anymore. You may be disciplining a little differently. Coaching years, we're standing on the sidelines. We are kind of coaching them while they're learning to make some independent decisions and all of that, and we're coaching them along. There are times that we yank them off the field, but a lot of the times we're just coaching, and we're moving to that thing where we're connecting rather than always correcting like we were doing in the training years.
One of the things that we've noticed too, and some of you, this will explain your struggle, is if you don't discipline in the discipline years, you will have to discipline in the training years. And when you discipline in the training years, it's more complicated because then you have to train in the coaching years. And when your children are in middle school and especially high school, but once a young man or young woman, as many of you know right now, hit middle school, it is time to start coaching. If you're still disciplining and training, it's just more challenging. Now, when we say disciplining, that doesn't mean when you're middle school or high school or does something wrong that you don't discipline them. But in terms of that immediate consequence, that immediate discipline, and we're going to give some specifics in just a few minutes. When our children are very young, they need immediate consequence. The problem is, and I see this with men and with fathers oftentimes, is because they're not engaged here, they suddenly get engaged here or more engaged here, and they start doing instant discipline and instant punishment in the middle school and high school years. Newsflash, it doesn't work. It didn't work with you. It doesn't work with your kids. So the sequencing of this, and some of you are thinking, well, I wish I heard this years ago. I wish you had heard it years ago too. But the point is, the sequencing of this really is important. And we were taught this early on. We didn't come up with this ourselves. So these are super important. And this is going to be a framework for some of the things that we'll talk about later.
Right.
You want to talk about?
A couple more things about the coaching years. One of them is, this is when we let them start experiencing natural consequences, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. But these are the years where they really are experiencing more natural consequences rather than us coming up with some punishment or something like that. One of the things that we did, that we learned during this, early on, but in anticipation of this season, we read a book by Shanti Feldhahn that some of you may have heard of called For Parents Only. And one of the things we took away from that book, there were a lot of things, but one of them was don't freak out. When you're in the late training and the coaching years, if you freak out when your kids tell you something, whether it's something great or whether it's something terrible, they're just going to shut down and you aren't going to get any more information. Yep. So when they're telling you something, whether it's awesome, and we moms are really bad about kind of freaking out over good things, like, oh, that's so great. And our voices go up and they're like, oh, brother, I knew I shouldn't have told her.
I knew I shouldn't have invited her to the ball game.
right?
Yeah.
There's that. So anyway, don't freak out. Put on the poker face. Yeah, so what happened after you ran out of bullets? I mean, you got to put on the poker face so that they'll keep talking. And I'm telling you, during the coaching years, you want your kids to talk.
Yep.
And anything you can do to foster that is super, super important.
And here, this goes back to what I said earlier. I've seen so many parents try to train in the coaching years. And what happens is your kids begin to talk and they begin to, sort of just tell you what's going on. And moms and dads jump in and think these are all teachable moments. They're not. Teachable moments mostly happen right here. Mm-hmm. If you try to make teachable moments right here, your kids just stop talking.
You get the eye roll.
Yeah, you get the eye roll, and especially your introverted kids, you're just gonna stop talking. So if once you get to middle school and high school, you can be a receiver of information and you never freak out. When they tell you the most horrific stories and they're involved in things.
About their friends or about somebody that they know.
You just go, wow, I bet that was, were you scared? Were you, just let them talk. If you try to train, I mean, if this becomes, every time I tell my mom something, she's going to give me something new to do, or my dad's going to freak out. And how many times did you say, or have you heard kids say, my parents are going to freak out? This is so huge. And if you have little kids, you're thinking, hey, I don't know if I'm going to remember this. The don't freak out rule is extraordinary. How many times have we sat at the table and our kids would have left and we're sitting at the dinner table and we look at each other and say what?
We say, would you have told your mom that? Would you have told your parents that?
We're like, I would have never told my parents that. But it's because my parents would have what? They would have freaked out. Yeah, but if you just go, they just keep talking anyway.
And it doesn't mean you ignore it. You circle back around later with, after you process together, what in the world are we going to do about that?
Yeah.
But you just don't want to shut them down. That is the big deal thing in coaching years. And then there's the friendship years. And this is kind of where we are right now. And I'm telling you, it is fantastic. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a few minutes.
When Andrew, our oldest, was born, we were on our way to Hilton Head. And he was in the car seat, the back seat. He's 24, right?
Yep, he'll be 24 next month.
He's got a job. He graduated from college. He's got
like
a job.
A real job. He's off our payroll.
He's got insurance.
Awesome.
It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. So we're driving to Hilton Head, South Carolina to meet her family for vacation. And I said, we need some family goals. And I'm not a big goal setter, but I thought, how it is. It's like we need something. So we came up with 3 goals. And over the course of time, just a few years, the 3 goals became 1 goal because I'm not much of a goal setter. And this really became our objective, our North Star for parenting. And I gotta be honest, I didn't get this from my family. I came up with this, or I introduced this idea and said, hey, I think this needs to be the thing, watching Sandra's family. Our families are very different, but as I thought about raising kids, I thought I really want our family to look more like hers than ours, and no point in going into detail about that. So here's where we landed, and I'll tell you up front, it's a little self-serving, but I'll explain why it's self-serving after I show you. So this was, and you don't have to adopt this, but this setting a North Star for parenting, I'm telling you, this influenced how we disciplined, as you're gonna hear. This influenced how we scheduled. This influenced everything because we decided up front, and this is what I passionately wanted, and I think more than Sandra, because she grew up in this environment, so it was normal for her, but for me, it was not normal, and I wanted to figure out what we can do to be intentional about bending our family in this direction. So here was our family, or sort of our parenting objective, and these aren't the original words, but it needed to be somewhat of a complete sentence. So we wanted children who want to be with us and with each other when they don't have to. It's not even a complete sentence, that's why there's no period. But essentially it was, we want children who want to be with us and want to be with each other when they no longer have to. When they grow up and they can do whatever they want to do, we want at the end of the day for them to want to be with us. And here's why that is a big deal. If you have perfectly behaved children who do not want to be with you, that is not a very rewarding situation for a parent.
It's not the win.
If you have perfectly behaved kids who can't get along with each other, that's not a win. And if you have perfectly behaved kids that you can't get to leave when it's time to leave. That's not a win either. So the win in parenting, I think the bullseye on the target is to have children who want to be with you and with each other when they don't have to. Now, it is somewhat self-serving, but here's why this was such a big deal to me. As Sandra mentioned, we spent 10 or 11 years in student ministry where we worked with middle school and high school kids. And we saw every kind of family, every kind of parenting situation. And we concluded, as many of you have concluded, and as the studies all show, that children and people rather who come from family-centered families where there is a connection with mom and dad and there's a connection with siblings, there is an internal security that you can't get really any other way, and there's a sense of maturity, and there's a deeper understanding of relationships and how relationships work when families are family-centered as opposed to being fragmented. It's just a principle. So as self-serving as that sounds, I also knew that it would create in our kids, if we were able to pull this off, a deeper sense of personal security, and they may grow up and do, who knows what, but in terms of leaving family with with a centeredness that's a healthy center for them, we knew, I was convinced this was the way to do it. So it's certainly rewarding to us, but as we've watched our kids hit middle school, high school, college, and graduate, I would argue, but you have to decide for yourself, I would argue this is the bullseye on the target.